It happened at a steakhouse off I-71, the kind of place with dim lights and overpriced wine. Brian laughed too loud, spoke too fast, and drank like the world owed him celebration. We were seated at a round-corner booth, myself, Brian, and two junior partners from a regional firm that had been sniffing around him for months. He leaned back, swirling his glass, and said the words that curdled my stomach. Frank's old contacts practically begged me to take over. I didn't even have to sell myself. Just mentioned my name and bam, contracts in hand. My hands were under the table, steady as stone. I kept my face blank, but inside, I felt something twist. I had mentored Brian, pulled him from obscurity when he was fresh out of Ohio State, taught him how to build trust in the consulting world, how to protect client interests like your own blood. I thought he was the one I'd eventually pass the torch to, maybe even fold into my private practice before I retired. Instead, here he was, 20 years younger, grinning like he'd won the lottery, not knowing the old man across the table was recording every word. That night, in early March of this year, I was using a small lapel mic clipped inside my coat. It was part of my new workflow. Record meetings, transcribe later. Not for anything like this, but sometimes life hands you exactly what you weren't asking for. The recording was clean, crisp. You could hear the clink of glass, the murmur of the jazz trio in the background, and Brian's exact words. Frank doesn't understand. His kind of loyalty died with fax machines. The game's about leverage now, and I've got it. It wasn't just ego. It was a confession, a violation of the non-compete clause he had signed 2 years ago. Specific clients he named, tactics he bragged about, even mentioned the firm's name that had lured him in. That night I went home and sat in silence. I didn't call anyone, didn't write a word, just sat on my porch with the recording playing through an old speaker, listening to every betrayal wrapped in arrogance. My name is Frank Delaney. I'm 66 years old, semi-retired, and I've built my life and livelihood on one thing: trust. And now, I was staring down the cold reality that I'd been made a fool of, used, dismissed. Tell me something. Where are you watching from? Because I know I'm not the only one. Maybe you felt it too. That slow realization that someone you lifted up is now standing on your shoulders just to step on your head. But I wasn't done yet. Brian may have thought he'd outplayed me. He had no idea what I still had in my hands. And I wasn't going to whisper this war. I was going to make sure he heard it play back in his own voice. The next morning, I woke before dawn. I didn't sleep much anyway. Not since Linda passed 5 years ago. The house was quiet, the way I liked it. The only sound was the furnace kicking on and the occasional hum of traffic on the distant interstate. I poured myself a black coffee, opened my file cabinet, and pulled out the red folder labeled Brian Willard, NDA NCC. I'd written the contract myself, with revisions reviewed by Dana, my longtime friend and attorney out of Lexington. She's sharp, doesn't miss a comma. The clause was ironclad. No solicitation of current or former clients within 24 months of departure. Period. It was the kind of contract I rarely had to enforce, because the people I mentored didn't need reminders. Until now. I played the recording again, this time with pen in hand. At timestamp 1742, Brian named the Montvale Group. They were mine. Clients I'd served since 2012, through restructures, layoffs, and even a lawsuit. I remembered sitting with their CFO in a hospital waiting room while his son had surgery. We weren't just consultants. We were family to some of these folks, and Brian, he listed them like trading cards. I didn't rush. I took notes. I compiled a list of every client he mentioned, every phrase that confirmed poaching. Then I sent Dana a short text. Got something big. Breach on record. Need 20 minutes. She replied in 2. Call now. We spoke on speaker, my kitchen table covered in printouts and yellow legal pads. She listened to the audio, paused, rewound, cursed under her breath. This isn't just a breach, Frank. It's willful, documented, and arrogant. He admitted to undermining you. And if those clients moved because of him, that's quantifiable damages. I know, I said. You want to pursue this? I looked out the frosted kitchen window. A light snow had started falling. Dana, this isn't about revenge. It's about restoring what he tried to take from me. My name. She was silent for a moment, then said, Let's draft the cease and desist first. No emotion, just facts. And Frank, don't send it yet. Let me handle that part. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Dana always knew when to pull the trigger, and more importantly, when to wait. I hung up and sat back in my chair. The snow was coming down heavier now. The world outside quiet, but I could feel the storm building. You know, it's a strange kind of grief, when someone you taught everything turns around and teaches you who they really are. But I wasn't grieving. I was documenting. And when Brian received that envelope in a few days, I wanted his fingers to shake the way mine had at that steakhouse. By midweek, I knew I had to talk to someone outside the legal side. I needed to feel the damage, not just measure it. I needed to know how far the cracks had spread. I started with Daniel from Montvale Group. We've known each other since 2012. Back then, he was a mid-level operations guy with a fire in his chest, and I was helping them restructure their entire supply chain after a series of bad mergers. We worked through nights, argued over spreadsheets, shook hands across too many conference room tables. When his father died, I sat with him at the memorial. We weren't just business. I called him from my porch just after 10 o'clock a.m. He answered on the second ring. Frank? Man, been too long. Yeah, it has, I said. Thought I'd check in, see how things are going. He sounded warm. But there was a hesitation under his voice, like someone who owed you a favor they forgot to return. Everything's fine, he said. We've been moving fast on a few logistics overhauls, lot of things in motion. Yeah, I said slowly. Who's guiding you through that now? Silence. Then, we've been talking with Brian. There it was, clean and sharp, like stepping on broken glass barefoot. He reached out about 6 months ago, Daniel continued, stumbling over his words. Said he had some availability. Said he'd been part of your team for years and knew your methods inside out. Honestly, we assumed you had passed the torch. Is that not the case? I took a breath so I wouldn't sound like I'd been punched. No, Daniel, that's not the case. He went quiet. I could hear the guilt crackling through the line like static. He didn't mean harm, but the harm was done. Look, he said, we haven't signed anything permanent. We've just been consulting on a few light things, optimization plans, mostly. Nothing like before. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Understood. Frank, you know we'd never— I know, I said, cutting him off gently. I just needed to know where we stood. When we hung up, I sat with the phone in my lap for a long time. Daniel wasn't the villain here. He was just one of many who had been played. And Brian, he didn't come in with guns blazing. He slid into the space I left open when I started pulling back. He didn't announce war. He whispered it. That was the part that stung. Not that I lost a client, but that my silence had made it easy. I poured a second coffee. The wind had picked up, leaves swirling against the porch like they didn't know where to land. That's what betrayal does. It doesn't always slap you in the face. Sometimes it just fades your name from a door you built, and the next name to call would be even harder. I waited until Thursday to call Lila. She runs Crossbridge Logistics out of Cleveland. We met 12 years ago during a warehouse consolidation project that turned into a full systems overhaul. I'd walked her through her first board presentation, taught her how to prep executives without sounding like she was begging. She's sharp, steady, and loyal. Or at least, I always thought she was. She picked up mid-ring. Frank, my God, it's been too long. I was going to call you last week. That sounded good. Too good. I smiled, but only half. Just checking in, wondering how things are on your end. Busy as ever, she said. Q1's been a nightmare. We've been working with, well, actually, I thought you'd heard. Brian's helping us with the route consolidations. My throat went tight, but I kept my voice even. He told you I was stepping back? Yeah, she said, sounding cautious. He said you'd been dealing with some health stuff, that you were slowing down. We figured. Honestly, Frank, he made it sound like it was mutual, like you handed him the reins. There was a pause on the line that felt like years. I stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the backyard I'd mowed 100 times. Each blade of grass now holding more meaning than the voice on the other end. I didn't hand anything over, I said slowly. Oh. Her voice cracked a little. Frank, I'm sorry. I wouldn't have gone forward if I'd known. Don't apologize, I said. Just tell me one thing. Has he signed anything? Scope of work, retainer, anything formal? Yes, small contract, 3-month engagement. It was under our discretionary fund, so it didn't go through the full board. Of course it didn't. That's how he did it. Low visibility, low friction, fast entry. He's been good. I won't lie, she said, almost whispering now. But he's not you, and he never will be. I thanked her for the honesty. We exchanged polite goodbyes. I told her to take care. Then I hung up and sat down hard, the weight of it settling into my bones. He told them I was sick, that I was stepping back, that I'd passed the torch like some old man who'd finally had enough. He didn't just steal my clients. He rewrote my exit. That was the moment the grief turned into something else. Not rage, not revenge, but a kind of resolve I hadn't felt in years. Brian thought I was stepping back, but I was just getting started. Saturday morning, I drove 2 hours to Lexington to meet Donna in person. She insisted. Said there were things we should go over face to face. I didn't argue. She knew me too well. Knew I wasn't the type to fire off lawsuits or make noise unless I'd measured every inch of what it would cost. Her office was in a renovated brick building downtown. 2nd floor, no elevator. I took the stairs like I always had. Slow, but steady. She met me at the top with a yellow folder already in her hand. Before we go inside, she said, just tell me one thing. You're really ready to go through with this? I looked her in the eye. He's out there lying about me, telling people I'm finished. That's not business, Dana. That's personal. She nodded. Then let's get to work. Inside, she laid everything out. Timeline of the breaches, client lists, contract copies, printed screenshots from Brian's LinkedIn updates where he hinted at taking over legacy accounts. He never said my name directly, but everyone knew who he meant. I handed over the audio files, printouts of email chains with clients, my full calendar showing dates I was in active talks with the same people he had approached. Every dot was connected. Dana just kept underlining. Frank, we're not talking about a simple violation here. This is calculated, repeat behavior. And the false health narrative? She looked up at me. That crosses into defamation. That word sat heavy. Defamation. I had never imagined I'd live to hear someone use that word about my name. We worked for 2 hours. By the end, Dana had enough to draft the formal cease and desist, plus a preliminary damage estimate. If you want to pursue civil damages, we'll need affidavits, testimonies, client statements. I told her I'd get them, not for money, for the truth. Back home that night, I opened the old storage boxes I kept under the stairs. Inside were files going back 20 years, contracts, proposals, hand-signed letters from clients who were long gone but never forgotten. I organized everything, created a timeline of my work history with Montvale, Crossbridge, Halden. Every late-night meeting, every emergency call I picked up on holidays, every moment I chose honor over shortcuts. Brian didn't just take clients, he erased those years with one lie, and in doing so, he reminded me who I still was. Not a relic, not a fading name, but a man with receipts and a reason. Monday morning, the cease and desist was ready. Dana had printed it on heavy stock, embossed with her firm's letterhead. It wasn't flashy, just factual, quiet, and lethal. 3 pages. Clear terms. Demand to cease contact with all named clients. Immediate termination of any current engagements. 30 days to respond or face litigation. I could have had it served by courier, or email, or overnight envelope, but I didn't. I wanted to hand it to him myself. Brian had moved into a co-working suite downtown. Glass walls, fake plants. That artificial hum of productivity people confuse with meaning. I parked across the street around 9 o'clock a.m. and sat in the car with the envelope on the passenger seat. I watched him through the window for 10 minutes. Same navy blazer, same careless stride, laughing with someone half his age, holding a coffee like it made him important. I wondered if he ever thought about me, about what it meant to be given a career, not just a job, about what it cost to lose respect, not from enemies, but from the people who built your name. I thought of Linda, of all the times I came home late to tuck in our daughter after pulling an all-nighter on some logistics plan, of the years I spent teaching young men like him not just how to win, but how to hold themselves together when things fell apart. Brian never asked for that kind of wisdom. He only saw what he could take. I got out of the car. The receptionist looked up, recognized me, and gave that polite smile people save for the older generation. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to see Brian Willard. No appointment." She hesitated, then nodded. "Give me a moment." A minute later, he stepped into the lobby, caught off guard. "Frank?" He tried to play it light, flashing that smile. "Didn't expect to see you down here." I didn't answer right away. I handed him the envelope. He looked at it, confused. Read the first line. His face changed. The color drained a little. He opened his mouth to say something, but I raised a hand. Not angry, just done. "You lied about me, Brian. You took my clients, my name, and my silence for weakness." He tried to speak. I didn't let him. "This isn't about revenge. It's about accountability. You want to run your own game? Fine. But you don't get to build it on my back." I turned and walked out, didn't look back. Back in the car, I sat for a while. Hands steady, breathing slow. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't angry. I was awake. And I was done waiting for someone else to write the ending. The day after I handed Brian the envelope, the house was quieter than usual. Not the peaceful kind of quiet. The kind that settles in like fog. Thick in your lungs. Hard to breathe through. I made coffee. Sat at the kitchen table with the newspaper open but unread. The photo on the front page showed a smiling mayor breaking ground on some shiny new development. All I could see was the shovel he held like a prop. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. What I felt was tired. I'd done what I had to do. I stood my ground, spoke my truth. But when you reach my age, you learn that even victory comes with an ache. And sometimes it's not the betrayal that hurts the most. It's what it reveals, how easily people forget the hands that built the floor they're standing on. The phone didn't ring. No calls from Brian, no emails, just silence. And part of me kept waiting, as if I still believed he might say something real, something honest. But I knew better. Instead, I opened the drawer where I kept old letters, paper things that mattered. One was from 2003, Crossbridge's first handwritten thank you note, with Lila's signature in purple ink. Another was from the Montvale CFO's assistant, thanking me for the emergency plan I stayed up 3 nights building while his wife was in labor. Real words from real people. Not emails, not invoices. Gratitude. I sat on the porch with those letters in my lap, wrapped in a rubber band, listened to the wind move through the trees out back, thought about what legacy means when the world moves faster than your name can keep up. Linda used to say, "You don't plant seeds for yourself. You plant them for shade you may never sit under." That's what it felt like now. Like I had spent years planting, watering, tending, and someone else had come along to claim the fruit. I didn't regret it. Not really. But I felt it. There's a kind of loneliness that only comes to people who've built things with their own hands. When the noise dies down and the spotlight shifts, you're left with calluses and silence. But I didn't throw the letters away. I stacked them neatly, placed them back in the drawer, and closed it gently. Because some things are worth keeping, even if no one claps for them anymore. It was just past noon when the phone rang. The number showed up as unknown, which usually means spam these days, but something told me to pick it up. "Frank, it's Harold Dunn." I hadn't heard that voice in nearly 2 years. Harold was the COO of Halden Technologies, the third name Brian had so casually dropped at that dinner. We'd worked together on a merger back in 2015. He was sharp, dry as dust, and always paid on time. We weren't friends exactly, but there was respect. Solid, mutual, no frills. "Harold," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Didn't expect to hear from you." "I know," he said. "That's why I'm calling." There was a long pause. Then he cleared his throat. "I need to apologize." I didn't say anything. He kept going. "Brian came to us 6 months ago. Said he was taking over your book, that you were stepping back. Said he'd been the one handling most of the work toward the end anyway." "And you believed him," I said. There was a silence on the other end that said everything I needed to hear. "I did," Harold admitted. "And I regret it." He sounded tired. Not dramatic, not desperate, just honest. Last week he delivered a proposal that was sloppy. Missed key specs. Misrepresented our warehouse capacity by almost 40%. When I asked him to clarify, he danced around it. That's when I knew. "You didn't call me to fix his numbers," I said flatly. "No," he said. "I called to say I know what he did, and I'm sorry I didn't check with you first." It wasn't vindication. It wasn't some grand gesture, but it meant something. "I don't need a contract, Harold," I said, "but I appreciate the call." He hesitated again. "If you ever want to walk us through this expansion, off the books even, just say the word. We trust you, not because of a name, because of who you've always been." We hung up not long after. No promises, no big declarations. But the silence that followed felt different this time. Not empty, just clean. Sometimes the weight of being right isn't light. It just shifts from one shoulder to the other. But for the first time in a long while, I stood up and didn't feel like I was carrying it alone. 2 days later, Dana called. "He responded," she said. No preamble. "Through a lawyer. Tone's what you'd expect. Minimizing, posturing, calling it all a misunderstanding." I didn't respond. Just let her talk. They claim the clients came to him. That he never initiated contact. That your non-compete was broad and outdated. I almost laughed. "That clause was reviewed in 2022, I said. "If that's outdated, I'm a steam engine." She chuckled softly, but it didn't reach either of us. "I'll handle it," she said. "I just wanted you to know, it's starting." After we hung up, I sat in the hallway for a while. Just sat. Didn't think. Didn't plan. Let the quiet wrap around me. The house was still full of Linda, her photos, her handwriting on recipe cards I could never bring myself to throw away. The Afghan she crocheted still on the back of the sofa, fading a little more each year. When she was dying, I remember asking her if she had any regrets. She said, "Only that we don't get to see the whole ripple." "What ripple?" I asked. "The good we put in the world. We don't live long enough to see how far it reaches." That stayed with me. And now, sitting in the hallway with Brian's voice echoing in my mind and a lawyer's arrogance in my inbox, I realized how fragile that ripple can feel. Like it could disappear with one careless man's ambition, but it doesn't. I walked through each room of the house, touching the door frames like I used to when our daughter was small, checking her height. I passed the study, where I used to work late into the night, past the bedroom, where Linda once held my hand and told me she was proud of the man I'd become. Pride isn't currency in business anymore, but it's still something. I sat at the kitchen table and wrote out a list, not of clients or losses, but of names. People I'd mentored over the years. Some who went on to do great things. Some who folded. All of them better for having been taught how to do things right. Brian's name wasn't on it. I didn't need a list of the people who betrayed me. I needed to remember the ones who didn't. That's how I survived this, not with lawsuits or takedowns, but with memory, with roots deeper than someone else's shortcuts. And if he thinks I'm backing down because he hired a loud lawyer, he still doesn't understand who taught him how to speak. The printer jammed on the second envelope. I smiled, not because it was funny, but because it reminded me I was still doing this the old way. Paper, ink, a decent pen. I never liked mass emails. They feel like shouting into a room full of people who aren't listening. I wanted something quieter, something real. So I sat down and wrote the first letter by hand. Dear Angela, you've been with me since 2011, through mergers, audits, and that god-awful winter when your warehouse roof collapsed. I haven't forgotten the trust you placed in me when you said, "Frank, if you think it's right, we'll do it." I'm writing to say thank you, not to defend my name, just to honor the part of our work that was never about invoices or outcomes, but integrity. I'm still here, and I still believe in doing this the right way. Warmly, Frank Delaney. I wrote 6 letters that day, all to clients who mattered. People who sent holiday cards, remembered Linda's name, asked about my daughter's graduation. They didn't need updates on lawsuits or legal threats. They just needed to know I hadn't disappeared, because that's what betrayal tries to do. It doesn't just damage your business. It tries to erase your presence from the room. I won't let that happen. At the post office, the clerk looked at the envelopes and asked, "These hand-delivered?" "No," I said. "Mailed. But they matter." She gave me a nod like she understood. That evening, I took a walk around the neighborhood. The air was crisp, leaves brittle underfoot. Same sidewalks I'd paced when I first started my consulting firm out of a borrowed back office, working evenings while Linda worked double shifts at the clinic. I thought about all the rooms I'd sat in over the years, conference tables, plant floors, boardrooms. So many decisions, so many chances to take shortcuts. I never did. And now, I was walking those same streets again, slower, older, but still upright, still here, still with something to offer. The world doesn't always cheer for the man who does things quietly, but he leaves a mark anyway. And this time, I wasn't letting anyone rewrite that mark but me. The first email came late at night. Subject line, "You probably don't remember me." But I did. Greg Stevens, junior analyst at Bainson back in 2016. I taught him how to run his first budget projection without overcompensating for error margins. He was nervous back then, overdressed, underconfident. I hadn't heard from him in years. His message was short. "Heard what happened. Just wanted to say, you taught me more about doing business with integrity than any MBA class ever did. Whatever's going on, I believe you. Always did." I stared at the screen a long time. The next morning, there were 3 more emails. Lila forwarded a short note. I've reconsidered our engagement with Brian. We'll be reviewing alternatives. Another came from someone I barely remembered, an admin who used to coordinate travel for one of my projects in Chicago. She wrote, Frank, you were the only one who ever treated me like part of the room. I'm sorry he turned out the way he did. Then, that afternoon, a letter arrived in the mail. Real paper, looped handwriting. It was from a man named Walt Hammond, Crossbridge's former VP of Compliance. Retired now. He wrote, Some people cut corners. You sanded edges by hand. I saw that. Always did. Let the lawyers handle what they must, but know this. Your name still holds more water than it ever will. Don't forget it. I folded the letter slowly, set it beside the others. I wasn't looking for applause. But somewhere in all this noise, legal filings, contracts, silence, I had forgotten what quiet affirmation feels like. And yet, there was a weight to it. Why now? Why do people wait until something's been broken to say it was ever whole? It's strange. When you do things right for so long, people stop noticing. They assume it's who you are, like gravity, until someone else defies it. But these messages, they reminded me. I wasn't invisible. I wasn't outdated. I wasn't finished. I was remembered. And sometimes, that's the beginning of everything coming back into focus. Not with thunder, but with a whisper that says, you mattered. Still do. The call came from a colleague I hadn't spoken to in over a year. Name's Tom Heller, manages operations at a firm in Dayton. We crossed paths on a joint contract once. Shared a few drinks at a logistics conference in Atlanta. No real friendship, but mutual respect. Just thought you should know, he said. Brian's losing ground. I didn't answer. He overpromised on the Broadwell account. Missed 2 major deadlines. Word's getting around. Clients are backing off. He's scrambling. Still, I didn't speak. Tom hesitated, then added, Thought that might make you feel better. But it didn't. I thanked him and hung up. Then I sat in the den and stared at the old bookshelf where my daughter's framed graduation photo still sat. Her smile frozen in a time before any of this mess. Before lawsuits and breach letters. Before betrayal wore a blazer and called me mentor. The thing about reputation is, it's slow to build and quick to burn. Like dry timber in summer. Brian had built his house with gasoline. It didn't surprise me that it was catching fire, but what surprised me was how little comfort it brought. You'd think watching someone who stole from you get burned would feel like justice, but it doesn't. Not really. It feels like a funeral for something that never had to die, because the truth is, I didn't want to destroy Brian. I wanted him to stop, to understand what he'd done, to step back and apologize, maybe even ask how to fix it. But that's not how these stories go. Men like Brian don't look back. They just keep driving until the tires come off. I stood up, walked to the window, and watched the wind scatter the leaves across my yard. The season was changing again. I could feel it in my knees, in the creak of the porch steps, in the air itself. Everything I'd built over 40 years could have been gone in 6 months if I hadn't stood up. That truth chilled me more than any lawsuit. Reputation isn't armor. It's breath, fleeting, invisible, essential. And if Brian was losing his, it wasn't because I struck him down. It's because the truth has gravity, and eventually it pulls the lie apart. The envelope was plain. No name, no return address. Just my name in slanted print, like someone who couldn't decide if they wanted to be recognized. I knew the handwriting before I opened it. Brian. Inside, a single sheet of notepaper, lined, creased once down the middle. Frank. I'm not going to pretend this letter makes things right. I know what I did hurt you. I know it crossed a line. I told myself you were done, that you were pulling back, that I was stepping in, not stepping over. Maybe I believed it. Maybe I wanted to believe it. You gave me more than anyone else in this industry. I wouldn't be here without you. I don't know if I crossed the line on purpose, but I know I didn't stop myself when I should have. Do what you have to do. I get it. B. No defense, no excuses, but also no apology. I read it twice, then again. My hands were steady, but something in my chest cracked a little. Not out of sympathy. Out of the memory of what I once believed about that kid. He had potential, not just skill. Something rarer, promise. I saw it the day I hired him, and now here he was, sending me half confessions like paper bandages. I didn't call Dana. I didn't tell anyone about the letter, not yet. Instead, I folded it back along the crease, placed it in the desk drawer next to the old thank you cards and the printed-out client wins that nobody but me ever cared to archive. It didn't change anything, didn't ease the damage, but it was a signal, however faint, that he knew. He knew what he'd done. He knew who he'd done it to, and maybe, just maybe, he'd carry a piece of that weight from now on. It doesn't undo the breach. It doesn't repair the name he tried to dissolve. But sometimes, knowing they heard themselves speak out loud, that's enough. Sometimes it isn't. I closed the drawer, left the house for a long walk. The letter would still be there when I got back. So would the rest of it. It was a Tuesday when I drove past the old building, corner of 8th and Jefferson, across from the deli that still sells the same corned beef sandwich they did 20 years ago. My name used to be on the plaque outside. Frank Delaney Consulting, etched in brushed steel. Last I'd heard, some startup had moved in. Tech something or other. I parked across the street and just watched it for a while. The building hadn't changed much. Same gray stone. Same chipped awning. But the inside, new paint, newer furniture, younger faces behind the glass. I couldn't help wondering if they knew what used to live there. The hours, the sweat, the nights I slept under my own desk because a proposal had to be perfect by morning. I crossed the street, walked inside. The receptionist didn't know me. Why would she? She looked 19, typing furiously at a monitor the size of a television. Just looking around, I said, before she could ask. She nodded absently. Didn't care. I walked the hallway slowly, like I was retracing a dream. The office that used to be mine was now labeled Collaboration Hub. Inside were beanbags and glass walls scribbled with diagrams. I remembered when that room held a map of every state where I had a client. I used push pins, red for active, blue for prospects. They're probably all gone now. The pins, the map, the memory. In the break room, I saw the dent in the door frame I made in 2009. Moved a table without measuring. Never fixed it. Still there. That made me smile. Legacy doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just sits there, unnoticed, under layers of paint and policy. I didn't stay long. Back outside, I stood in front of the glass door, hands in my pockets, wondering if any of those inside had ever made a cold call from a payphone. If they'd ever handwritten proposals in motel rooms. If they knew how hard it used to be just to be taken seriously without a website and a LinkedIn banner. Probably not. And that's okay. I built something here. Even if no one remembers it, even if my name isn't on the wall anymore, it's still on the people I helped. It's still in the way they work, and that matters more than the signage. I walked back to the car, leaving the building behind like a closed book. Not because I was forgotten, but because I had already written what I needed to write there, and now it was time to turn the page. Dana called just after dinner. "Settlement offer came in," she said, her voice unreadable. I didn't speak. She continued, "Low 6 figures, no admission of wrongdoing, standard NDA. He walks away clean. You get a check and a clause that bars you from discussing any of it publicly." I stared out the kitchen window. The sky was going dim, the last strands of pink dying into gray. "Of course he wants silence," I said. Dana sighed. "Most do." I asked her to send it over, said I'd think on it. After we hung up, I poured a glass of the bourbon Linda used to buy me on birthdays. Still had a bottle from last year I hadn't touched. I sat in the den, same chair where I'd listened to that recording of Brian months ago, and thought about what that check would mean. Money wasn't the point. It never was. The point was what it represented. An invitation to disappear. A quiet deal. A revision of history where no one was wrong. Just misunderstood. I could take it. Use it to pay for my daughter's student loans. Donate it to the community center where Linda used to volunteer. Close the book. Walk away. But a part of me, the old part, the principled part, kept asking, what if walking away isn't the dignified thing? What if staying loud is? Because accepting meant allowing his version to stand, sanded down, neutralized, sanitized for comfort. And that's not what happened. He betrayed me. He lied. He rewrote my story while I was still alive to tell it. The next morning, I sat with Dana in her office. She looked at me across the desk. "Well?" I slid the paper back to her, unsigned. "Tell them I'm not interested." Her face didn't change. She just nodded. "I'll prepare the counter." We didn't talk about money after that. We talked about depositions, timelines, statements. I left her office lighter than I expected. Not happy, not relieved. But clean. Some people spend their whole lives trying to protect their name. Others only learn the value of it after they've sold it. I wasn't going to be either. I was going to keep mine intact, even if it cost me more than the check was worth. It wasn't the kind of writing I used to do. No pitch, no forecast, no logistics matrix to clean up and explain to people who didn't understand the margins between chaos and efficiency. This was something else entirely. Dana called it personal statement. I called it testimony. My words, my terms. For the court, yes, but more than that, for me. I sat at the dining room table, the same one Linda and I bought secondhand in '87. Still had a burn mark in the corner where she once set down a pot without a trivet. I ran my finger over that mark for a long time before writing the first line. My name is Frank Delaney, and for 42 years, I built a business the slow, honorable way. It didn't flow like I expected. It came in fragments, in scenes, in small truths that had nowhere else to live but on that page. I wrote about the clients, about late nights and emergency calls, about the way Brian watched me in meetings, learning my tone, my posture, the pauses I used to make people feel heard. I wrote about what it felt like to hear my name spoken in the past tense by people who still owed me their trust. I wrote about what it cost to stay quiet and why I finally didn't. By the time I finished, it was dark outside. The house had that quiet hum that only comes when you've said something out loud, even if no one's heard it yet. I didn't read it back right away. Didn't tweak the phrasing or fix the typos. I just signed it. Because sometimes the truth isn't pretty. It isn't polished. It's tired and worn, and maybe even a little bitter, but it's yours, and no one gets to edit it out of the record. Not even the man who tried. I folded the pages, placed them in the envelope Dana gave me. Then I sat in the dark with the TV off and the house silent, holding that envelope like it was a map back to something I thought I'd lost. Not reputation, not clients. Me. Angela chose a small coffee shop off Main, the kind with chipped mugs and real sugar packets. I arrived 10 minutes early, as always. She walked in exactly on time, wrapped in the same soft navy coat I remembered from a conference years ago. We didn't hug, just nodded at each other the way people do when too much has been felt to say right away. She sat down, smiled, and said, "You look tired, Frank." "I am," I said, "but not worn out." We talked for a while, small things at first. Her son had gotten married. Her dog had finally stopped chewing shoes. She was thinking of retiring next year. Then her face changed. She leaned forward. "I read the statement Dana sent," she said. "I asked her for a copy. I hope that's okay." I nodded. "Of course." She looked down at her coffee. It was honest. It sounded like you. That was the point. She reached into her bag and pulled out something folded in thirds, one of my old project plans, yellowed and worn. "You gave me this in 2012. Said if I followed it to the letter, we'd save 6 figures in 2 quarters. I followed it. We saved 8. I smiled. "I remember." "Frank." I never forgot who showed me how to hold a room, how to push back without drawing blood. You didn't just consult, you raised people. That caught in my throat. I had to look away for a second. "It matters," she added. "What you built. Still matters, even if some idiot tried to repurpose it like a used blueprint." I laughed gently at that. He didn't understand what he was copying. "No," she said. "He didn't understand that the value wasn't in the plans. It was in the man who made them." We sat there for a while longer. No legal talk, no strategy. Just 2 people who'd been in the game long enough to know what's real. When we parted ways, she hugged me this time. A quiet, brief thing, but it stayed with me the whole drive home. That night I didn't review paperwork. I didn't prepare rebuttals. I sat on the porch with a single light on, letting the breeze roll through the screens. Loyalty doesn't make noise. It doesn't need to. It just shows up. And sometimes, that's more powerful than any verdict. Courthouses don't feel like places where people win. They feel like places where things are sorted, filed, labeled, until the hurt gets buried under legalese and precedent. But I showed up anyway. Dana met me outside, file in hand, eyes calm. She'd done everything right. And now it was my turn to do one more thing right, too. We stepped inside. Brian was there already. Gray suit, tight jaw, no eye contact. He looked older than the last time I saw him, like someone who'd finally realized the cost of shortcuts. When they called my name, I stood, walked to the front, raised my hand, swore to tell the truth and nothing but. I didn't use notes. I didn't need them. I told the court who I was, what I'd built, the terms he'd agreed to, the clients I'd cultivated, the history behind each name, the trust they didn't hand out lightly. I spoke slowly, clearly, not because I wanted to convince anyone, but because I wanted to hear it out loud. I wanted the world, even in its cold, official form, to witness what decency sounds like when it refuses to be silenced. I didn't say Brian's name often. This wasn't about him. It was about the work, the years, the hands that shook mine and meant it, the hours I didn't bill for, the people I taught to lead with their ears instead of their mouths. When I was done, the room was still, not moved, not broken, just still. The judge nodded, asked a few clarifying questions, and recessed for the day. No gavel bang, no cinematic finale, just procedure. Outside, Dana exhaled. "You did well," she said. "I did honest," I replied. I walked alone to the parking lot. Didn't look back. Didn't need to. I didn't care how the ruling would read. I already knew what mattered. I kept my name. I kept my word. And I kept the story mine. That's the thing about betrayal. It tries to shrink you, to make you smaller than the damage. But if you stand up, speak clearly, and hold steady, it loses the one thing it needs to win: your silence. And mine was over.